This is Swisher County, Texas. It's up in the Texas Panhandle. Amarillo is an hour due north. Lubbock is an hour due south from the county seat in Little Swisher County, which is called Trulia, Texas. Does that name ring a bell for you? Even if you have no connection to Texas at all, and you don't know the name of every little town of 5,000 people in Texas, the name Trulia, Texas might ring a bell for you if, for example, you ever watch 60 Minutes on CBS. Since Trulia, Texas was the subject of one of the most astonishing interviews the great Ed Bradley ever put on TV as part of that show.
Early one morning in 1999, Tom Coleman's efforts culminated in the arrest of 13% of Trulia's adult black population. They were rousted out of bed, paraded in front of local television cameras in handcuffs, many of them half-dressed, and charged with selling cocaine to Tom Coleman at various times over the course of his investigation. The town newspaper declared Trulia's streets cleared of garbage. It may be no coincidence that the road led Tom Coleman to the town's black community. It was well known that he had used racial slurs in front of his superior officers in Trulia.
Everybody's making a big deal. Oh, God, he said words like, oh, let's put him in an electric chair. Well, yeah, the word was bad back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s, and 60s, and 70s. But now it's just a common slang, you know? Yeah, I mean, people, you can watch TV and hear that word, you know? It's a greeting.
Coleman told me he used the N-word to fit in with blacks during his investigation, and admits he also used it among his white friends.
The word, yes, sir, I've used that word. I've used it a lot. Yeah, what's up?
Is that a greeting you'd use with me?
Oh, no, sir, not you.
But it's okay to use it around other people?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, not you, sir. You, I would never look in the face and call the N-word, but I otherwise use it all the time. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen in a 60 Minutes interview, and for 60 Minutes, that's saying something. But the overall story was just insane. This is sort of a small town, right? About 5,000 people, as they say, in the Texas Panhandle. One morning, they mass arrest more than a tenth of the entire black population of the town. And all of them, more than 40 people arrested, they're all accused of being big-time, like cartel-level drug dealers and drug kingpins. Here's how New York Times columnist Bob Herbert described it at the time in a column that he called Kafka in Trulia. He said, quote, Kafka could have had a field day with Trulia. On the morning of July 23rd, law enforcement officers fanned out and arrested more than 10% of Trulia's tiny African-American population. Also arrested were a handful of whites who had relationships with blacks. The humiliating roundup was intensely covered by the local media, which had been tipped off in advance. Men and women, bewildered and unkempt, were paraded before TV cameras and featured prominently on the evening news. They were drug traffickers, one and all, said the sheriff. Among the 46 so-called traffickers were a pig farmer, a forklift operator, and a number of ordinary young women with children. If these were major cocaine dealers, as alleged, they were among the oddest in the U.S. None of them had any money to speak of, and when they were arrested, they didn't have any cocaine. No drugs, no money, no weapons were recovered during the surprise roundup. The first convictions, nevertheless, came quickly. One of the few white defendants, a man who happened to have a mixed-race child, was sentenced to more than 300 years in prison. The hog farmer, a black man in his late 50s, was sentenced to 90 years in prison. A 24-year-old black man was sentenced to 60 years in prison, and so on. The entire operation was the work of a single police officer who claimed to have conducted an 18-month undercover operation. The arrests were made solely on the word of this one officer, Tom Coleman. Mr. Coleman's alleged undercover operation was ridiculous. There were no other police officers to corroborate his activities. He did not wear a wire or conduct any video surveillance. He did not keep detailed records of his alleged drug buys. He said he sometimes wrote such important information as the names of suspects and the dates of transactions on his leg. In trial after trial, prosecutors put Coleman on the witness stand, and his uncorroborated, unsubstantiated testimony was enough to send people to prison for decades. Uncorroborated, unsubstantiated. What was all the more amazing about this was that the cop in question, who was the single-handed law enforcement source and the source of all evidence in this entire roundup of more than 40 people. The cop in question cheerfully admitted that he had absolutely no evidence, absolutely no corroboration, absolutely no way to substantiate anything that he was saying against any of these people whatsoever. All of it was just what he said, which he was happy to admit because clearly that was enough.
They were all given harsh sentences ranging from 20 to 341 years in prison, even though the arrests had turned up no cocaine, no drug paraphernalia, no weapons, no money, or any other signs of drug dealing. The convictions were based solely on the uncorroborated word of Tom Coleman, who had followed none of the standard procedures routinely used in undercover drug operations across the country. Just for the record, did you wear a wire or other recording device?
No, sir.
Did you have any video or photographic evidence that the buys took place?
No, sir.
Did you have any independent eyewitness testimony from another undercover officer?
No, sir.
Did you have any fingerprint evidence?
No, sir.
But don't you want something more than your word?
Mm-hmm.
Another little piece of evidence that can point the finger at that person?
Yes, sir, that would have helped. But that's not how the operation went.
Sentences of up to 341 years in prison. Dozens of people arrested, convicted, sentenced to very hard time. The cumulative number of years that these folks got in prison was over 750 years in prison. They're all arrested that one day, all based on that one officer with no supporting evidence whatsoever. Texas state officials at the time were beside themselves, by which I mean they were delighted. More than 10% of all the black people in that town arrested and put in prison. A third of all the black men in that town. Give that officer a reward. They actually did give him an award. The Texas State Attorney General at the time gave that officer the Lawman of the Year award. The State Attorney General of Texas did that. And then it all fell apart. It all fell apart astonishingly.
More than a dozen people convicted on drug charges are expected to be freed from Texas prisons today. This after the officer whose testimony sent them to prison was charged with perjury. NBC's Jim Cummins is in Trulia, Texas, with more on this story. Hey, Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. That's right. It was a huge drug case for such a small town involving minorities, but now apparently it is falling apart. In July 1999, the authorities in Trulia, Texas, population 5,081, made a drug bust, arresting 46 people, 39 of them black, as part of a sting operation conducted by one undercover cop. Tom Coleman, posing as a long-haired biker with a drug habit, claimed he bought cocaine from the suspects. Some plea bargained for short prison sentences. The others went to trial, and on the strength of Coleman's testimony only, 19 of them were sentenced to a total of about 800 years in prison. But on judicial review, Coleman's cases began to fall apart.
Every transcript from every trial that ever took place around the sting has evidence of Tom Coleman perjuring himself on the stand.
One woman, Tanya White, could prove that she was 300 miles away in Oklahoma City cashing a check the same day Coleman testified she sold cocaine to him in Trulia. There is outrage over this drug bust. The Texas legislature passed a bill calling for the release of all the suspects until the appeals of this case are heard. So later today, in the same courthouse where they were convicted, the remaining 13 people will be released by a judge.
That was June 2003. That was a morning report that aired on NBC and the Today Show that morning. And then later that day, that judge did free everybody, because it turns out when pressed, when somebody actually tried to defend these people against these charges, when you started to investigate whether or not what this one cop had said was true, it turns out the cases against all of them were entirely made up.
Basically, I'm a trial judge.
So 2 months ago, District Judge Ron Chapman ruled that all Trulia suspects had been improperly convicted. Yeah. Today, 12 of those, still doing time, were brought back in chains to the same courthouse where they had been tried.
Let these people go. Let them go today.
And Judge Chapman did release them on their own recognizance until their cases are decided on appeal. Meanwhile, Coleman has been indicted for aggravated perjury in another case. It was jubilation for them and their loved ones. Joe Moore was the first to be convicted, and he got 90 years. He was asked what he had lost from this experience.
Just about my life.
Tonight, most of the Trulia drug suspects now have a chance to resume their lives.
Great day. Great day.
Good afternoon. My name is Vanita Gupta. I'm an attorney with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Following a dramatic hearing at the Swisher County Courthouse today, retired District Judge Ron Chapman granted bail and ordered the immediate release of 13 individuals who were wrongfully convicted of drug charges in Trulia, Texas, and have been in prison for years since their arrests. Judge Chapman found Tom Coleman to be, quote, the most devious, non-responsive law enforcement witness this court has witnessed in 25 years on the bench in Texas. According to the court's findings, Coleman submitted false reports, misrepresented his investigative work, and misidentified various defendants during his investigation. In addition, testimony by Coleman and other law enforcement officials involved in the Trulia drug sting revealed Coleman's arrest on theft charges and abuse of official capacity while conducting the Trulia investigation.
Did you catch that last bit? The cop in question here, the cop who made up all the information that resulted in the arrest of all these people and them all getting these 60, 90, 300-year sentences, the cop himself got arrested during the course of this investigation for theft and abuse of office. The Kafka-esque upending of this town was the work of this one crooked police officer who himself had been charged with theft and abuse, who would go on, in fact, to be convicted of perjury. That young civil rights attorney who went to Trulia, Texas in the wake of all these convictions, who went through all of the cases and realized that they were all built on nothing, who personally lined up lawyers from all around the country for more than 30 defendants who didn't have any defense counsel, whose appeals had already been rejected, who acted as lead counsel herself for the NAACP in all those defendants' cases as they pried this thing open, who got the crooked cop to break down and melt down on the stand in March 2003, which did break open the case, and all the convictions were overturned, and all the prisoners were freed. And in August 2003, Texas Republican Governor Rick Perry issued a full and complete pardon for all of those poor people. That young civil rights attorney who exposed what happened there, who made that happen, her name is Vanita Gupta.
I basically spent 2 full days in the Swisher County Courthouse going through files, trying to piece together the stories of these cases, and then found out who their family members were in the town and just drove to their homes and spent a fair amount of time really just kind of getting to know them.
She wasn't just a little lady with a little voice. She was a little lady with a lot of power and a lot of knowledge and a lot of caring.
We will not rest in our quest to right the horrific wrongs that have been inflicted on our clients and on this community.
I came back to New York and I made a chart of the 46 individuals and kind of compiled all of that information. We needed to put law enforcement on trial. I also realized that I was one attorney with 46 potential clients, so I mobilized the law firms in New York City and Washington, D.C.
It's footage from one of several documentaries that has been made about this landmark miscarriage of justice and what it took to expose it and end it. That lawyer, Vanita Gupta, went on to become the head of the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Justice Department under President Obama. Widely respected in that role, she served in that very high-profile job without any whiff of scandal or trouble. President Biden has since nominated her to be the number 3 official in the whole Justice Department, Assistant Attorney General. In that nomination, she has, among other things, the support of every major law enforcement organization in the country, including the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the police union organization that twice endorsed Donald Trump. Even they support Vanita Gupta. Vanita Gupta is one of the senior Justice Department officials who is not confirmed in this administration because Republicans are not only blocking her nomination, they are slow walking it through the Senate. They're trying to trip it up, trying to keep her from being confirmed. And here's the thing. Here's why this is all worth knowing. Ready? Who do you think is the Republican senator who is leading the charge against Vanita Gupta? and has stopped her from being confirmed thus far. So Merrick Garland doesn't have any of his top people there with him at the Justice Department. Vanita Gupta is going to be the number 3 official at the Justice Department. She's not there yet. Why is that? Well, there's a Republican senator taking point on this, leading the charge to try to keep her from being confirmed. Who is that? It's a senator from Texas. A senator from Texas who used to be Attorney General of the state of Texas. It's Texas Senator John Cornyn, who, when he was Attorney General of the state of Texas, is the guy who gave Officer Tom Coleman the Texas Lawman of the Year award for his great work in Trulia, Texas. Before Vanita Gupta came in and exposed who that guy actually was, before he was convicted of perjury, before every single one of those cases was overturned because that guy made them all up. And they all got full pardons from Rick Perry because of the Kafka-esque nightmare and disaster that was that guy, who John Cornyn named Lawman of the Year. I just wonder if Senator John Cornyn might be at all embarrassed about this, and about the young lawyer who came to Texas and exposed this thing, this terrible and cartoonishly evil thing that he had helped along, that he had celebrated, that he had given an award to. It is now Senator John Cornyn leading the charge against Vanita Gupta to be the number 3 official at the U.S. Justice Department, even against all of those law enforcement organizations endorsing her. Judiciary Committee is due to vote on her nomination tomorrow. Republicans, led by John Cornyn, have been demanding that Vanita Gupta actually needs to come back and do her confirmation hearings over a second time. That is not going to happen. Tonight, we have obtained exclusively, I think, the reply letter from Democratic Judiciary Committee Chairman Senator Dick Durbin, the reply to Republican senators demanding that she needs to do her confirmation all over again. Senator Durbin telling Republicans, no, they are not going to stop Vanita Gupta's nomination any longer. It says in part, quote, "Dear Senators, while I always appreciate hearing from colleagues on the committee, your request to hold a second hearing on Vanita Gupta's nomination to be Associate Attorney General appears to be little more than a delay tactic, aimed not at gathering more information, but at obstructing a highly qualified and historic nominee who's dedicated her career to the protection and expansion of civil rights. The committee will not hold a second hearing for Ms. Gupta, and her nomination will move forward with a committee vote. A second hearing on Gupta's nomination is unwarranted and unnecessary. The committee will vote on her nomination tomorrow. Sincerely, Dick Durbin, committee chairman." Vanita Gupta is going to be confirmed by the Senate ultimately. She will be the number 3 official at the U.S. Justice Department under Merrick Garland. And that is despite unified Republican opposition to her, led by the senator who she humiliated and exposed in Texas nearly 20 years ago for his enabling, encouraging, celebrating role in one of the worst, most racially explosive, astonishingly brazen law enforcement put-up jobs in the last generation. Senator Cornyn, I do not know if he's ashamed by his role in all that. I wonder if he ever tried to get the award back. But his effort to get revenge on the woman who had to come in and fix his mess, that effort will fail. She will win and he will lose again. God bless Texas.